Hello everyone, and welcome to this new video tutorial for Maverick Render. In this tutorial, we will learn new animation techniques in Maverick, including how to animate propellers and use the camera switch motion controller. Here you can see the final result of the drone animation we are going to create. We will visit the Sketchfab website to download this fantastic model. We'll leave the link in the description, and as always, we thank its author. Once imported into Maverick, remember that the most important thing when starting with this type of scene is to properly organize the model. In this case, we have separated the drone's body from each motor to animate them individually. Let's start by animating one of the propellers. Create a motion controller and drop it onto motor 1. Zoom in on the IPR to see it and place yourself on a final frame in the timeline. Now configure the rotation in turns mode and set it to 10. As you can see, the motor rotates, but not from its center because the assembly's centroid is not aligned with the axis. We'll temporarily deactivate the motion controller because we need to create a target and place it at the rotation center. Create a target, and using surface mode, it will be very easy. Move it until it's centered on the axis. Include this target in the drone's assembly so it becomes part of it when moved. Now reactivate the motion controller, go to the coordinates, enable the pivot mode, and select target 1. Hide the target gizmo so it doesn't get in the way, and scrub through the timeline to check that the propeller now rotates from its center. Repeat the process for the next motor. Create a motion controller, drop it onto motor 2. Zoom in on the IPR, go to a final frame, and set the rotation to 10 turns. Once again, the rotation is off-center, so follow the same steps. Create a target, use surface mode to place it at the axis center. Add target 2 to the drone's assembly and enable pivot mode in the motion controller coordinates to select it. Check the resulting animation to ensure it works correctly. Repeat this process for the remaining 2 motors, speeding up the video for brevity. Now all 4 motors are configured. Next, let's address a common issue with circular object rotations. Select the IBL, activate the backplate, and set it to black to better see the motion blur effect. When playing the animation, you'll notice the motion appears polygonal rather than circular. To clarify this, go to the Globals panel and adjust the motion blur settings. In the Objects Form options, configure the subframes. The default is set to 2 as this effect is computationally intensive. Increase the subframe's value and observe the effect. To make it more noticeable, increase the rotation of all propellers to 100 turns. Now it's clear that a low subframe count produces polygonal motion blur. Setting subframes to 33 makes the blur perfectly circular. For internal calculations, using powers of 2 plus 1 is more optimal. Reduce the subframes again to compare the difference. Now we have perfect motion blur for the propellers. Let's continue setting up the scene. Deactivate the backplate to see the IBL again. Select a more suitable HDRI environment for the drone. Visit the Polyheaven website, which offers many environments for your scenes. We've chosen one we like. Download it and use it in Maverick by dropping it onto the IPR, where it will automatically set as the environment in your IBL. Rotate it to position it as desired. Next, configure the camera position, and once you're satisfied, save it. We'll add movement to the drone to simulate takeoff. Create a motion controller and drop it onto the drone's general assembly. Move to a final frame on the timeline and set the final Z-axis position. Scrub through the timeline to see the entire drone, including the animated motors moving upward. Speed up the motion by shortening the motion controller. Adjust the easing options to make the takeoff start slower. Set the tension lower until it looks good. Now create a camera motion. Add a motion controller to the camera. Move to a final timeline frame and adjust the X-axis rotation. If you don't see the effect in the IPR, click the camera's home icon. Hold the control key and use the mouse wheel for finer adjustments in the slider. Tweak the motion until it's satisfactory. Sync the motion controller duration with the drone's takeoff and apply the same easing settings. With the camera and drone animation perfectly aligned, create a new camera. Position yourself in the IPR further away from the drone and create the new camera. Now let's animate the drone moving forward with a slight tilt. Create a motion controller, drop it onto the drone, and place it after the takeoff motion in the timeline. To view camera changes in real time, create a camera switch. Drop it onto camera 1 and adjust its duration to the camera movement. Do the same for camera 2. Ensure camera 1 is selected before scrubbing. Now you can see the camera transition in the IPR. Continue with the final motion controller to move the drone forward. Go to a final position and set the Y-axis displacement. View the full animation. Adjust the timeline duration to cover the entire sequence. Now the drone takes off, switches cameras, and moves forward. Fine-tune speeds by shortening the motion controllers. Add a final drone tilt. Create a motion controller. Drop it onto the drone and reorganize the timeline with its many controllers. Set the Z-axis rotation and ensure it only happens at the final motion phase. Finally, create an overhead camera to track the drone. Add another camera switch to camera 3. Scrub through the timeline to check the animation. If you lose track of the drone, reposition and save camera 3. Now review the full motion sequence. As always, adjust motion controllers for drone movement and speed. Extend the propeller motion controllers to cover the entire animation. For smoother camera transitions, add fade effects. Create a front plate motion controller and place it at camera transitions. Using ping pong mode, create a black fade transition. Clone this front plate and position it for the next transition. Now play the animation and review it. Gradually, you've created an effective promotional video. Finally, let's render the animation. Go to the Render panel under the Timeline tab. Adjust the resolution. To see this change in the IPR, update it in the Globals panel. Set the sampling level, typically between 7 and 9, with denoiser for animations. Specify your output path and enable video saving. It's advisable to increase the bitrate for better video quality. We hope you've learned many techniques and tips to apply to your projects. Here's the final drone animation. That's all for now. See you in future videos. Have fun with Maverick.